problem. And the reason why I specifically say it's a casual problem is because it's one of the biggest esports games. In terms of whether something's the best, obviously numbers entirely don't determine that. So I would say it's arguably the best esports game. It's certainly one of the best esports games. I think up there with League of Legends, up there with Dota 2. But you look at the player base of the game, so we're going beyond just the competitive and the esports side. Okay, it's very difficult to get accurate numbers for this. So you look online and there's numbers for CSGO owners in terms of accounts bought over the years, which obviously won't all be active, of it's between 20 million and 50 million are the numbers I could find online. Now you contrast those with the other big esports games. League of Legends boasts 100 million or more. Dota 2 is boasting 100 to 200 million. Remember, they have a lot of active Chinese players there. League of Legends obviously has the entire world. Overwatch obviously only came out in 2016 in terms of the beta. Already in late 2017, they were reporting 35 million accounts. Now, it's understandable why something like CSGO would have a lot of interest in the esports side, but wouldn't necessarily be banging the charts in terms of active users and accounts. And hence, in terms of the active user peak, much, much lower than a lot of these games. Think about it. As an esports game, it's much easier to watch and understand, crucially. Understand as well as watch. It's got great crossover potential between titles. Most people are aware of what an FPS is. They know the basic concepts of CS, and therefore they can enjoy a match. There aren't any extra characters or heroes or burden of knowledge to know, or understanding of some deep macro strategy that you won't be able to understand even the basics of. The mechanisms of the game are fairly easy. Hence, you have people who are League of Legends fans who watch CSGO, Dota fans who watch CSGO, Overwatch fans who watch CSGO. There isn't as much crossover between those games, though. There's also the factor, it might be a small one, that there are no Asians, essentially. Yes, obviously now we have some of the good Chinese teams getting involved. We have an okay team from Korea, but we don't have world-beating Koreans. We don't have amazing Chinese teams. If you're in a game like Overwatch and League of Legends, Koreans are the best. If you're in a game like Dota, historically, one of the strongest regions ever has been China. Then you look, okay, so it's successful as an esport game, less so in terms of casual base, when you contrast it with the other titles in esports that it's competing with. That's also not really that surprising, though. So just as it makes sense that it has quite a larger esports interest, seemingly, than the raw numbers of players playing, contrasted to the other games, in terms of it having those lower numbers of players, also not that surprising, right? I mean, as you might have been able to figure out from what I said before, it doesn't really have China fully engaged. Korea's not fully engaged. And when I say that, yes, they have MVP, PK, but you know what? In League of Legends, Korea has more ranked players who play solo queue than North America does. And you think of League of Legends, you think North America immediately. That's the first place you think of. That's obviously where Riot Games came from. It also, just as a lesser degree, has no Southeast Asian scene effectively. You don't have top teams from Taiwan or Singapore or whatever it might be. In Dota, those regions have produced some fabulous teams. You think of some of the players who played in Fnatic and some of these teams. Then you think of League of Legends, and actually Southeast Asia has produced gradually better and better teams that they've had top 4 finishes in big tournaments like MSI. They've had teams that were able to take big games off the top teams in the world, Flash Wolves, AHQ. These have been regular kind of fixtures at the big international tournaments. We don't really have teams like that, a scene like that in our game. Then you've got to add in, just as a game, it's generally harder to play for the beginner, for the casual player. Therefore, that translates to generally meaning in the initial period of people playing and being bad and not knowing much about the game, tends to be less fun due to the specialization of the game. Those other games tend to be either all-rounder games where you can do lots of different roles and types depending on what you want to do, some very light mechanical tasks and you still play the game, very heavy mechanical tasks if you just want to focus on that, something between the two. You can jungle, so it's more of a cerebral game than there's all different roles you can play in these other games. Counter-Strike, not really. Everyone's the same. You're all just a guy, same health, same speed, same jumping thing. You've all just got guns, so who's the best with the guns? Sure, you can use different guns, but even then the pool of guns we use, much more limited than the pool of heroes or champions or whatever in these other games and options on what to play. And we're not balancing the meta as much, so you might be bad at something now, you're probably going to be bad at that for a long time in Counter-Strike. You're not going to suddenly switch the meta so that your style of firing or the type of gun you prefer to use is suddenly OP compared to the others. It's not generally happening. Then you add in the raw skills it takes, Well, it's an FPS game, so first of all, you have to be able to handle looking in that particular sense. I know people who say that they get motion sick when they play. It's a famous thing that some people who've never played FPS games actually say. That's not going to happen to you in League of Legends. Then you look, it has a precision element. Actually, how precise you are, how small the movements you can make and how precise they are is going to dictate how good you are, and therefore probably how much fun you generally have from the game, in a way that it isn't in League of Legends, where there's on-hit abilities in a game like Overwatch, where you can actually just play and heal someone. You don't necessarily have to be doing proper damage yourself. You can play as a support in Dota and just play with a really strong player and do what he tells you. You might have a chance to win. It's not really the same in Counter-Strike. Then you add in the hand-eye coordination element of mechanics. Again, certain people are going to be gifted in this sense. Some people are going to grind massive amounts of hours, and they're going to gain huge advantages over you. That isn't going to be as exacerbated in games like the MOBA games and in games like Overwatch. I told you there are roles that are less mechanically intensive and aren't about being a DPS or whatever. They might just be a tank and soak up damage and know where to position yourself, or you might be a healer. There's lots of other options there. Then you've got to throw in, compared to all these other games, I think CSGO's probably got the worst matchmaking system. Doesn't tend to be very good at matching you. You tend to meet more cheaters, bizarrely, in these games. I mean, I have to say, I wonder if Valve not kind of pursuing court cases against people has anything to do with that in the modern day. Then you've got to add in that typically in CSGO, once you get anywhere near a competitive level, to really have fun in the game and feel like you're playing anything close to what the pros play, you tend to need some third-party service to kind of get the full experience. You need FACEIT, you need ESEA. Now, that's not really the case in League of Legends. It's actually got a fairly decent ranked system. Overwatch, likewise, not really the case. So what's the problem here? Why can't CSGO get as many people who want to play it? And why, more importantly to me, can't it retain it? Because I feel like that's another factor. Sure, some of these games, you look obviously at Overwatch, it came out before Overwatch, but it came out after Dota 2 and League of Legends, especially League of Legends. So why isn't it able to not necessarily build the user base, but why can't it retain it? Why can't it keep more casual players? Well, first of all, as I said before, it is more of a hardcore game generally for the casual player. This is the point. Yes, at the highest level, Dota 2 can be a very skilled game, a lot of tactics. Certainly Overwatch can be, but at the most fun, basic level, I think it's a lot easier for the beginner to have fun in Counter-Strike. So actually, I think that CSGO's problem is somewhat reminiscent of StarCraft 2, because StarCraft 2, since it was designed with esports in mind, they eschewed and ignored a lot of what made StarCraft Broodwater a very popular multiplayer game, which wasn't a hardcore esports 1v1 ladder rank mode, and they went too hardcore into that. And what it meant was, unless you could get up the energy to go, right, I'm going to play a hardcore mode where it's 1v1, it's intense, it's all in, all this aspect, which funnily enough in StarCraft 2 harkened back to Quake, and why people didn't like Quake and preferred Counter-Strike. It's going to have some feeling of that, and as a result, people aren't going to feel always like they can just relax in the game and have fun. It's a bit too hardcore. Well, that isn't actually how the old Counter-Strike was played. This is an aspect I think modern fans really miss about Counter-Strike, actually, as in they miss the point of, which is, in the old school days, for probably the first 3 or 4 years, the main way the majority of people played Counter-Strike, in fact, for most of Counter-Strike 1.6's history, the main way most people who ever played a game of Counter-Strike played was in a public mode. So they played, you joined teams, let's say like 8v8 up to 16v16. You didn't play a set match, you just joined in the server. If you joined 10 minutes in the game, you get whatever, 10 minutes that's left. If the guy joined at the beginning of the game, he has 20 minutes. He could maybe get more kills than you. If you join 1 minute before it ends in a minute, then it goes to the next map. Also, you don't always pick the map. There were some servers you could vote in, some of them just went on a map cycle. Again, you're not even picking where to play. It wasn't like CSGO where you play in a matchmaking mode and you can pick the map you want to play and you can even rank with people in the same way. It was mainly public, casuals, that this is the way it was mainly played. Then you not only had the bomb diffusal mode, DE, detonation, you had other modes. So obviously in the early days, it wasn't even detonation. It was actually saving the hostages. CS was the underscore. You went, the terrorists had the hostages. They had to keep hold of them. You as a counter-terrorist had to sneak in or kill them, get the hostages, take the hostages outside. You get your points at where the round resets. That was one of the other main ways people played. There was tons of servers playing Dust. Oh, that was obviously a bomb map. Assault was obviously a classic one. Militia, these were classic maps with the hostages. This was the main way people played. Then you come into CSGO, where we don't really have that aspect. There's not really that culture. I think people who want that sort of game probably go and play something like Call of Duty. So I think it's kind of, that's been taken away from Counter-Strike. I do think you should put some emphasis on it, make some fun modes, but I think generally the appeal's not there as much. I think there's other games that probably fit the very, very broad component of just casual play, where you just want to jump into a game, just shoot people, go away. I think even Overwatch probably has a better mode than that, generally, even though it's somewhat like the competitive mode, but not entirely. Then you've got to add in CSGO itself, matchmaking is obviously the main way to play, and matchmaking is too tied to rank. There isn't a proper normals mode, so you can't play matchmaking, but without it affecting your rank. Now, in League of Legends, you play normals, you can just play with your brother and your cousin, you can play with anyone, you get 2 extra people thrown in, you play, it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect your ranked mode, you don't go down a rank, you don't de-rank because you play with someone shitter than you. If you want to play with someone bad, that's the mode you play with them in. You can't even play with them like in CSGO unless they're near your rank otherwise. What a terrible feature that is. Imagine if in League of Legends it was like, oh, I want my girlfriend to play. Yeah, but she's not near your level. Oh, well, guess I can never play with you, love. See ya, go play with someone else. Like, that's a terrible mode to get people's friends to play, and that's also a way we used to play back in the day in Counter-Strike. We were playing with our friends, and we were going to the same server over and over again where people joining. This doesn't really exist in the same way in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Then you've got to add in, through no fault of CSGO's, other games have come out which are considered more fun, or they're the flavour of the moment, or they've got novelty factors. So obviously, if you want to play just a fun deathmatch mode, that's what most people get from playing PUBG, Fortnite, the Battle Royale games, right? Even Overwatch, when it first came out in 2016, you saw a dip, you saw people leaving League of Legends and CSGO, and the casuals were going and playing that game, and they were having a lot of fun. All these different options, different style of game, different game modes in that one, you'll notice, so it keeps some variety up. One of the problems here is, I think CSGO has to look how it got big as a game to kind of riddle through this conundrum of how does it get more players that are casual, because presumably that will help the game's overall strength and growth. It means people can leave and you've still got a big base. And how does it retain them? Because for me, the reason it got big, first of all, was the heritage. I mean, it has the Counter-Strike brand. I mean, I've always said, if it hadn't have had the skin aspect and the economy, I think Valve was a bit cynical, and that's why they farmed out the game. They didn't make the game themselves. They got the third path entertainment people to make the game, I think just as a cash-in. I thought some people will buy it because it's Counter-Strike. Sold those, and initially thought, yeah, that's fine. You know, we sold another game, keep going on with our lives. With Valve, I remember esports wasn't a big thing for them at that point in time. They'd only just started moving into Dota with the International. So for me, the heritage aspect was a big deal. I think brand recognition, people coming back, I haven't played Counter-Strike in years. Oh, there's a new Counter-Strike with new graphics. Cool, I'm in on this, you know. It's too late for me with the Counter-Strike 1.6. They're all too good for me. They've been playing 10 years. Funnily enough, the same thing people say about Quake World now. Even if you convince them it's a better game than Quake 3 or Quake Champions or Quake Live, they'll be like, oh, those guys have been playing for 10 years. I can never catch up. Doesn't really work that way, but okay, that's what they think. So brand recognition definitely hurts, not least because there's a decent amount of people who were gamers who either understood the concept of CS or had already played it years before. And so they were basically pre-packaged, and they were the easiest people to sell on the game for a little bit of fun, for a month's fun, for 3 months fun, before they got bored with it just in a matchmaking, like deathmatch style component. Then you obviously got to look at the skins, because the skins brought about gambling. That transferred some of the casuals into watching some of the matches, and generally it gave casuals another reason to interact with the game other than playing the game. And obviously you want to play the game to get the cases, to get the skins, and then also to have that component play into what you do with the gambling element. Now this all created the economy, and the key for this, in my opinion, the economy, is since Valve doesn't make money from the esports side of things. I mean, I know they made those esports cases early on with the majors. The economy gives Valve a way to make money. A lot of those other games, Dota 2, League of Legends, they're free games. So the way Valve's able to make money is you're buying keys, you're getting cases, that's making you want to buy more keys, you're getting skins, you want to trade them, you want to get better skins. All these aspects build into something, and Valve's making their cut the whole time from what essentially they've already done their work, and they're just making free money, license to print money. So yes, now they're interested in esports. I also think that helped them combat the fact that their game wasn't free and it had the initial barrier to entry. By the way, I think if it was free and it just had the skins economy, I think it'd also make a lot more money. But in a game with so much cheating, it would also probably make it a lot more riddled with cheaters than it even is right now. Then you've got to add in, you did have these third-party sites came up that give you a better user experience if you are a somewhat semi-professional, semi-competitive player, let's say. So you've got VeXii, you've got ESEA, you've got other things around the world that try to mimic them but aren't quite as good generally. Then also, I actually think having the open tournament circuit where you can have the top teams playing around the world in the best matches every month actually keeps people hyped about the game. It keeps some people who might otherwise drift out or go, I can't really bother following a whole season for 2 or 3 months. I'll come back when it's the major, when it's the World Championship. I think more of those people stay involved because you watch a great match, you watch a great player, you kind of get that itch, right? I'll have a game tonight. I'll play with some of the guys I remember. I'll jump back in with my old crew. I think that does exist to some degree. So then the question becomes, how do you get more users? Now, I'm not going to pretend I've got the answers on this one. I think it's a very tough question. It might not even be possible to get users to the level of a League of Legends or some of the other games. I mean, they have a very different appeal to them. But first of all, I thought one aspect is, someday, the fact that Counter-Strike is older in terms of graphics, obviously it came out in 2012, means you're probably going to have to update the graphical engine, because people who want to watch an FPS generally do tend to want good graphics, at least the newer fans. Otherwise, they're going to be drawn to the Battle Royale games, or they're going to be drawn to Call of Duty, etc., which comes out every year. Therefore, they can upgrade these graphical components. So, first of all, getting a new engine and porting Counter-Strike Global Offensive to it would be a big deal. Now, I even thought to myself, first of all, it's a way to make sales, but actually, I don't think that's the ideal way to do it. If I were them, I'd either put a system in place where if you owned CSGO, you got a discounted rate to upgrade to the new engine, if you could make money that way. I'd even consider making it free to play at this point in time, quite frankly, because like I say, the economy elements and skin elements, if you put them in there, they could also make you way more money than people just buying the game on the front end, and it gives you a reason to keep investing in the game if you're Valve. I would also say, though, to touch on the public thing I said before, I think there should be more emphasis on the casual mode. Find ways to make public server type play more fun. Might not be entirely possible because other games might fill that niche, but maybe have a matchmaking type rank for when you play in public servers, and then you're at least getting roughly matched with people. Now, I'd make it more fun. I wouldn't make it like you matched with everyone all your same level. I'd have a mode that's like that, and then I'd have a mode that's like old school style, so it tries to match just the whole server. So it puts a really good player with a really bad player, and then a pretty good player with a decent player, and it matches that way. And you've got a skill disparity, but that's going to be the fun of the internal of that pub server as you play out that particular game. Then you're going to have the aspect of, let's make normals mode. So now people can play with their friends. They can play with anyone they want without worrying about losing their rank. But they also know it's not a ranked game. So it's going to be less serious, less hate on people, hopefully, for losing the games. I mean, it doesn't always work in League, but it usually is less bad in the normals mode. And it's just a way to be able to let off steam, play with your friend who's way worse than you, but not worry about deranking or you having to carry the whole game like crazy versus some smurfer, which obviously does ruin the experience when you're a half-decent player in CSGO. Someone who's put in some time to become a semi-competitive player. I also think at the top end, you need to make matchmaking generally more like FACEIT, more like ESEA. You need to put in some of the features that those games have. You need to make it so that you can have the map voting and all these other factors in a way that you don't get it in matchmaking, and therefore it makes matchmaking more of a random experience. You never quite know what you're going to get from it. You're not in a position where it's going to be as good. I also think you can have a scenario where, for the pros, one thing CSGO lacks is we don't really have a proper like challenger ladder or top end of the scene where you really know that the top ranked people must be good in some way. Instead, people who are global elite can be, I mean, Vince Castor, obviously I'm mates with, play with sometimes. He's global elite. Now, I've seen Crims play and get deranked to like LEM before. So the ranks mean nothing in CSGO in that sense. But in League of Legends, someone on the level of what Vince actually is in CSGO would never get in a challenger. Meanwhile, in Challenger, you're going to have all the top pros, really skilled players, and so there's more of a logic to it. Now, admittedly, part of that may well be artificial from Riot, because I know that Riot has stopped certain in-house leagues, tried to stop players from going and fracturing off and playing elsewhere, and getting onto other services, because they want you to be in the general ladder, to be in the general populace, so that clubs think they can play against you, and therefore a player who's not pro can play against you, test his skills, and perhaps get into the pro scene. Now, there's pros and cons to that. I can see a logic of it, but we don't really have it in League of Legends. Also, we don't have a Korean solo queue, which is amazing in League of Legends, but we don't have some, or even Overwatch is probably half decent. We don't have something comparable to that overall. So there's clearly a lot of issues. Some of these are just factors of the nature of the current world and the fact that it's a much more populated world in terms of games and people have different interests, and someone who wants a casual game maybe doesn't come to CS. But I do think they could do a better job both on the casual side and on the competitive side, and hopefully CS could grow as a game, it could start to grow again, and it could retain more players overall. This video was made possible by Dean Tanglis, Sanity, Gardner Wilson, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Alex Adams, Mikkel Hansen, Jerky's Minion, Anthony, Bash, Daniel Yordanov, Yordan Tsenkov, TTMXMP, VeXii, HawpT, and Travis Greb. Want exclusive teasers, a place to discuss my content, or the opportunity to suggest guests and topics for my work? Join the Scrilluminati today via the Patreon link.